My name's Ethan, I'm 39, and my wife, Lisa, is 36. We've been married for 7 years, and until recently, I thought we were solid. I mean, we had our share of fights, but who doesn't? Lisa is, well, let's just say she's always had a strong personality. She speaks her mind, she's opinionated, and she doesn't back down. That was one of the things I loved about her when we first met. But over the years, that fiery personality started feeling less like passion and more like, well, entitlement. The first signs of trouble were small, little things that didn't sit right. Lisa became more distant, constantly on her phone or too busy to hang out like we used to. She'd dismiss my concerns, saying, God, Ethan, not everything's about you. Anytime I brought up how disconnected we felt. A few weeks ago, the sink in the upstairs bathroom started leaking. I'd been meaning to fix it myself, but between work and life, I never got around to it. Lisa, of course, was on my case about it constantly. Why do I have to live in a house that's falling apart? She'd snap, rolling her eyes like I was the laziest man alive. So, last week, I finally caved and called a plumber. A guy named Brad came by to check it out. He was in his early 40s, a little too friendly for my liking, but I didn't think much of it. Lisa was home when he came by, and I figured she'd just let him do the job and that would be the end of it. The day Brad came back to actually fix the sink, I had to run out to grab some groceries. Lisa offered to stay home and let him in. It's not like you'd fix it properly anyway, she said with a smirk. Her tone stung, but I let it slide. I thought I'd be gone for 45 minutes. Tops. When I came back, though, something felt off. When I walked in the door with bags of groceries, the house was unusually quiet. Normally, Lisa would be in the living room, scrolling through her phone or catching up on one of her trashy reality shows. But today, nothing.
Lisa,
I called out, setting the bags on the counter. No answer. I started heading upstairs to check the bathroom, thinking maybe she was showing Brad the leak. As I got closer, I heard muffled voices, hers and a man's, but something about the tone made my stomach turn. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it didn't sound like the kind of conversation you'd have about a broken sink. Then I heard it. Laughter. Her laughter. The kind she used to save for our date nights or private jokes, but now it was directed at someone else. I crept up to the bathroom door, which was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And that's when I saw them, Lisa and Brad, pressed against the counter way too close for it to be innocent. Her hand was on his chest, his hand on her waist, and they were whispering and laughing like teenagers sneaking around at prom. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. For a second, I thought maybe I was misinterpreting what I was seeing. But then Brad leaned in and kissed her. My blood ran cold. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I'd trusted for 7 years, was making out with the plumber in our bathroom while I was out buying groceries. I didn't say anything. I didn't even move. I just backed away from the door and went downstairs, trying to process what I'd just seen. My hands were shaking as I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the bags of food I just bought like they were mocking me. When I heard the bathroom door open and their voices coming down the stairs, I snapped out of it. Lisa walked into the kitchen, looking flustered but trying to play it cool. Brad followed a few seconds later, casually wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey, babe," Lisa said, her voice overly cheerful. "Brad just finished up. Everything's fixed." I looked at her, then at Brad, who had the audacity to give me a polite nod. "Yep, all set," he said, like he hadn't just been all over my wife minutes ago. I didn't say anything. I just clenched my jaw and handed Brad his check, watching as he left without a care in the world. As soon as the door closed behind him, I turned to Lisa. "You want to tell me what the hell that was?" Her smile faltered, and for the first time she looked genuinely nervous. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone defensive. "You and Brad," I said, my voice cold. "Upstairs. In the bathroom. Do you really think I'm that blind?" Lisa's face went pale for a split second before she recovered, crossing her arms like I was the one who had to answer for something. "What are you even talking about, Ethan?" she snapped. "Brad was fixing the sink. That's it." I stared at her, my jaw tight, barely containing my anger. Don't play dumb, Lisa. I saw you. I heard you. The laughing, the whispering, the... I trailed off, my voice breaking with disbelief. You were kissing him. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she might admit it. But instead, she rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Are you serious right now? You're imagining things. I'm imagining things? I said, my voice rising. Lisa, I saw you. I stood outside that bathroom door, and I saw everything. She scoffed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. So now you're spying on me? That's really healthy, Ethan. Maybe if you weren't so paranoid all the time, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. My blood was boiling. Don't turn this around on me, Lisa. You're the one who was fooling around with another man in our house. While I was out buying groceries, for God's sake. She threw up her hands dramatically. Oh, please. It's not like I slept with him. It was just a stupid kiss. It didn't mean anything. Oh, quiche. I repeated, laughing bitterly. Do you even hear yourself? You're justifying cheating on me with the plumber by saying it didn't mean anything? How long has this been going on, Lisa? How many times have you invited him over when I wasn't here? Her expression hardened, and her voice turned icy. You're being ridiculous. Brad was here to fix the sink, and maybe things got a little out of hand. But you're blowing this way out of proportion. Out of proportion? I yelled, slamming my hand on the counter. You betrayed me, Lisa. You humiliated me. And you think I'm overreacting. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of both of us breathing heavily. Then she dropped the act completely, narrowing her eyes at me. You know what, Ethan? Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have even looked at him. Did you ever think of that? Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I couldn't believe how cruel she was being, how easily she was trying to blame me for her actions. I stepped back, shaking my head. Wow, I said quietly. You really don't feel any guilt about this, do you? She hesitated for a second before shrugging. Look, I'm sorry if your feelings are hurt, but it's not like I don't have needs, Ethan. You're always working or off in your own little world, and I'm stuck here dealing with everything. So yeah, maybe I made a mistake. But don't act like you're some perfect saint who's never let me down. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, slamming it behind me. I needed space, air, anything to get away from her venomous words and the mess she'd created. I drove aimlessly for hours after leaving the house, my mind replaying the confrontation with Lisa over and over. Her indifference, her excuses, and her attempt to blame me for what happened. It was all too much to process. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there in silence. The betrayal felt like a punch to the gut. But what hurt even more was the realization that Lisa didn't seem to care. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. When I finally went back home, the house was quiet. Lisa was nowhere to be found, and for a moment, I thought she might have left. But then I noticed her car still in the driveway. She was probably sulking in the bedroom, waiting for me to calm down so she could spin another excuse. I didn't bother looking for her. Instead, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen. The silence in the house felt suffocating, a constant reminder of everything that had just fallen apart. The next day, Lisa acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, scrolled through her phone, and even hummed to herself while cooking breakfast. It was infuriating. We need to talk, I said, breaking the silence. She looked up, her expression annoyed. Again? I thought we already hashed this out, Ethan. Hashed this out, I said, incredulous. Lisa, you cheated on me. In our house. While I was out doing something as mundane as buying groceries. You think one argument makes it better. She sighed dramatically, setting her coffee cup down. What do you want me to say, Ethan? That I regret it? Fine, I regret it. But are you really going to end our marriage over one stupid mistake? Her words sent a fresh wave of anger through me. This isn't about one mistake, Lisa. It's about the fact that you don't even seem to care. You're treating this like it's no big deal, like I'm the one overreacting. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is for me? She rolled her eyes. Oh, poor Ethan. Always the victim. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of working late all the time, I wouldn't have been so bored. Bored? I repeated, my voice shaking. That's your excuse? You were bored, so you decided to hook up with the plumber? Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds? She stood up, crossing her arms defensively. You know what, Ethan? If you're so perfect, maybe you should have married someone else. Someone who doesn't expect you to actually show up in your own marriage. Her words hit me like a slap in the face, but I refused to let her get the upper hand. You're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head. You can't even own up to what you did without trying to make it my fault. Fine, she said, throwing her hands up. If you're so miserable, maybe we should just call it quits. Is that what you want? I stared at her, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Maybe it is, I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa's expression wavered for a moment, like she hadn't expected me to agree. But I was done. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. After that last fight, I knew there was no saving this marriage. Lisa's complete lack of accountability, her blame-shifting, and her total disregard for the damage she'd caused were more than I could take. I spent the next couple of days thinking about what to do, and the answer became clearer with each passing moment. I had to leave. The first step was consulting a lawyer. I didn't tell Lisa. I wasn't ready for another round of her theatrics. I made the appointment during my lunch break and laid everything out for the attorney. The affair, the disrespect, and the years of resentment that had been bubbling under the surface. You're making the right decision, the lawyer said after I finished. It's clear this relationship isn't healthy. We'll start gathering the necessary documentation and get the ball rolling. Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. When I got home that evening, Lisa was on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. I ignored her and went straight to the bedroom to start packing a few things. If she noticed, she didn't say anything. The next day, I told her my decision. Lisa, I said, standing in the doorway as she sat at the kitchen table. I've decided I'm filing for divorce. She looked up, her face a mix of shock and defiance. Are you serious? Dead serious, I said, my voice firm. This marriage is over. I'm done with the lies, the disrespect, and the way you've treated me. I deserve better than this. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but then her expression hardened. Fine, she said coldly. If that's what you want, go ahead. Don't expect me to fight for this if you're so ready to walk away. Her indifference stung, but it also confirmed that I was making the right choice. That weekend, I packed a few bags and moved into a friend's guest room while I figured out my next steps. Lisa barely reacted, which hurt more than I'd like to admit. But deep down, I knew this was the only way to regain my peace. The kids, our two boys, Liam, 10, and Mason, 8, were confused and upset when I told them about the separation. I didn't share the details of why it was happening. There was no way I was going to drag them into the mess Lisa had created, but I promised them that no matter what, I'd always be there for them. They seemed to accept my words, but I could see the sadness in their eyes. It broke my heart, but I reminded myself that staying in a toxic marriage would have been worse for them in the long run. As the days passed, I started to feel a sense of freedom. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the loneliness crept in, but I knew I was on the right path. Leaving the house was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was also the first step toward reclaiming my life. The days after I moved out were a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, and an odd sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, waiting for the next argument or passive-aggressive comment from Lisa. I focused on building a new routine for myself and staying strong for Liam and Mason. I made sure to spend as much time with them as possible, taking them to the park, helping with homework, and making Friday night pizza a tradition. I wanted them to know that no matter what was happening between their mom and me, They were my priority. Lisa, on the other hand, seemed completely unbothered by the separation. She didn't call or text unless it was about the kids, and even then, her messages were short and cold. Part of me was angry at her indifference. After everything she'd done, the least she could do was show some remorse. But another part of me was grateful. The less I had to deal with her, the better. One day, I got a text from a mutual friend, Sarah. She and her husband had been close to Lisa and me for years, but we hadn't spoken much since the separation. Sarah: "Hey Ethan, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I heard about what happened. I'm so sorry." The message caught me off guard. I hadn't told anyone outside my immediate circle about the affair, but it seemed like word was getting around. Me: "Thanks, Sarah. I'm doing okay. It's been rough, but I'm getting through it. Sarah, if you ever need to talk, we're here for you. Honestly, I always thought Lisa didn't treat you the way you deserved." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd convinced myself that Lisa's behavior was normal, that the way she treated me was just part of her strong personality. But hearing someone else validate my feelings made me realize how much I'd put up with, and how much better I deserved. That evening, after I put the kids to bed, I sat down with a notebook and started writing down my goals. They weren't anything big or dramatic, just small steps to help me move forward. Things like joining a gym, reconnecting with old friends, and finding a therapist to help me process everything. I wasn't looking to fix myself or rush into the next chapter of my life. I just wanted to feel like me again. After writing down my goals, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a while. Hope. It wasn't overwhelming or transformative, but it was there, like a small light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. The first thing I did was join a gym. I wasn't aiming to become a fitness guru or anything, but I wanted to channel my frustration and sadness into something productive. The gym became my sanctuary, a place where I could focus on myself without the weight of everything Lisa had done hanging over me. Next, I reached out to old friends I'd drifted away from during my marriage. Lisa had a way of isolating me from people, making me feel like spending time with anyone other than her was a betrayal. But now, I realized how much I'd missed having people in my corner. One of those friends, Mike, invited me over for a barbecue. It was the first social event I'd attended since leaving Lisa, and I almost didn't go. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face people, to explain what had happened. But Mike insisted, and I'm glad he did. Standing in his backyard with a cold beer in hand, surrounded by laughter and good conversation, I felt like a piece of myself was coming back. When someone asked about Lisa, I kept it simple. "We're separated," I said, leaving it at that. The pity in their eyes stung, but I reminded myself that this wasn't my failure. It was hers. Therapy was the next step. I was hesitant at first, not sure if talking to a stranger would really help. But my therapist, Carla, was amazing. She listened without judgment, helping me untangle the mess of emotions I'd been carrying. One session, I opened up about the moment I'd caught Lisa with Brad. I told Carla about how small and humiliated I'd felt, about the anger and sadness that still clung to me. "You're allowed to feel those things, Ethan," Carla said, "but don't let them define you. What Lisa did was a reflection of her, not you. Your worth isn't tied to her actions." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I'd internalized Lisa's treatment of me, believing that maybe I wasn't enough, that maybe I'd done something to deserve it. But slowly, I was starting to see the truth. I hadn't failed Lisa. She had failed me. I started setting boundaries with her, too. Our conversations became strictly about the kids, and I stopped letting her manipulate me with her guilt trips or dismissive attitude. One day, she texted me out of the blue. "Lisa, I think we should talk about giving our marriage another chance. For the kids' sake." I stared at the message for a long time before responding.
No, Lisa.
That ship has sailed. Let's focus on being good co-parents, not trying to fix something that's beyond repair." Her reply was short and cold, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life. Setting boundaries with Lisa felt like closing a door I'd been afraid to shut for far too long. It was liberating. For the first time in years, I could focus on building a life that wasn't tethered to her manipulations or constant criticisms. My routine became simpler, but also more fulfilling. I dropped the kids off at school in the morning, hit the gym, and then head to work. Afterward, I'd pick them up and spend the evenings cooking dinner together, playing games or watching movies. The house, once filled with tension, now felt lighter. One night, as we were eating dinner, Liam looked up and said, "Dad, you seem happier now." His words caught me off guard.
Doi.
I asked, smiling softly. He nodded. "Yeah, you smile more. And it feels, I don't know, like you're not mad all the time anymore." Hearing that from my 10-year-old hit me hard. I hadn't realized how much the stress of my marriage to Lisa had affected not just me, but the boys as well. Their observations reminded me that I wasn't just healing for myself. I was creating a better environment for them, too. Around this time, I started pursuing hobbies I'd let slip away during my marriage. I picked up woodworking again, a passion I'd abandoned because Lisa used to complain about the mess it made. I built a small bookshelf for Liam's room and a new bed frame for Mason, who thought it was the coolest thing ever. The more I invested in myself, the more I realized how much I'd sacrificed to keep Lisa happy. And the crazy thing? She was never happy no matter how much I gave. One weekend, while the boys were with Lisa, I went on my first hike in years. It was just me and the trail, no distractions. Standing at the top of a hill, overlooking miles of untouched nature, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. For the first time since the separation, I felt like I could see a future that didn't revolve around pain or betrayal. Meanwhile, Lisa wasn't doing as well. She tried a few more times to bait me into conversations about our marriage, but I stayed firm. The boys told me she seemed stressed and snapped at them more than usual, but I made sure to remind them that it wasn't their fault. "Mom's figuring things out in her own way," I told them. "Just remember, you can always talk to me if you need to." Every day wasn't perfect, of course. There were still moments when the anger and sadness crept back in, especially when I thought about Brad and how casually Lisa had destroyed our marriage. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as time went on. As the weeks turned into months, life started to feel normal. Not the same normal I had with Lisa, but a new one that felt healthier, freer, and more balanced. The boys adjusted well to the co-parenting arrangement. I made sure they knew they were my priority, and it showed in how much closer we'd become. One evening, while tucking Mason into bed, he asked, "Dad, are you ever going to get a new wife?" His question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask, buddy?" He shrugged. "I don't know. You just seem happier without Mom. But maybe you'd be even happier if you found someone nice." I laughed softly. "Maybe someday," I said, ruffling his hair. "But right now, I'm focusing on taking care of you and Liam. That's what matters most to me." His response was a sleepy, contented smile before he drifted off. Around this time, the divorce was finalized. I walked out of the courtroom with a mix of relief and sadness. Lisa and I had shared nearly a decade together, and while I was glad to be free from the toxicity, there was still a part of me mourning what we'd lost, or rather what I'd thought we had. Lisa didn't seem to take the divorce as well. She sent me a few emails after everything was finalized, mostly passive-aggressive jabs about how cold I'd been during the process or vague comments about how she was doing great. I didn't respond. I'd learned by then that engaging with her only dragged me back into her drama, and I wasn't willing to go there anymore. One weekend, while the boys were at her place, I decided to tackle something I'd been putting off for months: cleaning out the garage. It was full of old boxes and remnants of a life I no longer wanted to hold on to. As I sifted through the clutter, I found a box labeled Memories. Inside were photos of Lisa and me from happier times, vacations, anniversaries, even a few candid moments where we looked genuinely happy. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, flipping through the photos. For a moment, I let myself feel the sadness. The betrayal still stung, but looking at those pictures, I realized something important. The good moments we'd shared weren't a lie. They were real. But somewhere along the way, we'd lost sight of who we were to each other. I didn't keep the photos. I wasn't interested in clinging to the past. But letting go of them felt like a final step in closing that chapter of my life. Closing that box felt like shutting the door on a painful chapter of my life. It didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal, but it gave me a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. From that moment on, I decided to focus entirely on the future, on my kids, on my happiness, and on building a life I could be proud of. The boys continued to thrive in our new routine. Liam joined a soccer team, and I became the dad cheering loudly on the sidelines at every game. Mason developed an interest in art, and we spent afternoons sketching together at the kitchen table. Those moments reminded me of what truly mattered, and they kept me grounded. One day, while dropping the kids off at Lisa's apartment, she tried to spark a conversation. "You seem different," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Happier." "I am," I replied simply, not giving her the satisfaction of diving into the details. She hesitated, then added, "You know, Ethan, I really am sorry for how everything happened. I wish I'd handled things differently." Her words didn't have the impact she probably hoped for. Maybe there was a time when hearing her apologize might have meant something, but now, I'd already moved past the need for her validation. "I appreciate that," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "But we're in different places now. Let's just focus on the kids." Her expression faltered, but she nodded, stepping back into her apartment. That interaction solidified what I already knew. I was finally free. Free from her manipulation, free from the constant tension, and free to build the life I deserved. As the months went on, I started dipping my toes into dating again. I wasn't rushing anything. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but I felt ready to open myself up to the possibility of love again. It was strange at first, but it also reminded me that there were good, kind people out there, and that I wasn't defined by Lisa's betrayal. Looking back, I've learned so much from this experience. If there's one thing I'd share with anyone going through something similar, it's this: you're stronger than you think. Betrayal hurts like hell, but it doesn't have to break you. Take your time to grieve, to heal, and to rediscover who you are. Today, I'm happy. Not in some grand, dramatic way, but in the quiet, steady moments of everyday life. And that's enough for me. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over, and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.